Every insane conspiracy theory that turned out to be true. I love me a good conspiracy theory.
Heart attack pistol.
Especially when it turns out to be true.
In 1975, William Colby, the CIA director at the time, had to testify in front of a committee that was investigating the CIA. This happened because there were
It's always the CIA or the three-letter agencies.
many accusations of assassinations of foreign and American politicians from the
Heart
CIA.
attack pistol.
So the
I actually do remember hearing about this somewhere.
U.S. Senate put it under
I'm actually curious to see how many of these I already knew and how many of these are new to me. Let me know down in the comments how many of these are new to you as well.
investigation
Let's see
for
how much
alleged
we've learned
covert action
today.
abuses, which resulted in 14 reports of major abuses by the CIA, FBI, and NSA. However,
be the
there was
first time.
an accusation or conspiracy theory that was much more worrying than the rest of them. It was thought that the CIA had developed a pistol that could fire a poison dart from around 300 feet, cause death, and leave no trace of what the cause was.
poison
When William
dart.
Colby declared that they had a poison dart gun that was potentially basically completely silent, felt like a mosquito bite to the target, went through clothes, caused a heart attack, and left no traces but a small red spot because the dart melted, the public was shocked. Furthermore, it was revealed that this wasn't an isolated case. It was part of Project MK Naomi, a project designed to increase U.S. biological and chemical warfare capabilities.
Not
this
surprised.
was the only time this gun was shown in public. USA's fake Cuban terrorist attack. In 1962, during the Cold War, tensions between the U.S. and Cuba were high because Fidel Castro had risen to power in Cuba and allowed communists to join the new Cuban government, nationalized U.S. businesses, and improved relations with the Soviet Union. Furthermore, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened when the Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles capable of hitting the U.S. on Cuban soil after the U.S. placed theirs on Italy and Turkey. Operation
Some people think that the whole Cuban Missile Crisis was just a distraction in of itself, but I don't know what they mean by fake Cuban terrorist attack.
Northwoods was a plan by the United States Department of Defense to stage terrorist attacks against American citizens and blame the Cuban government in order to justify a war against
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Cuba. They wanted to hijack civilian planes and make them appear as if U.S. Air Force planes were shot down by Cuba to simulate the downing of a U.S. fighter jet off the coast of Cuba to blow a U.S. ship and to organize terrorist attacks in U.S. cities. The plan also
Sounds
included creating
familiar,
a
doesn't
communist
it?
terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington, which would involve bombing civilian targets. The plan was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but was ultimately rejected by President John F. Kennedy
Not
because
surprised.
it would have been too risky and could have led to a full-scale war with the Soviet Union. CIA's fake animals.
I did
The
hear
ne-
about this, more specifically about birds, but I wonder how many fake animals they're talking about. Because there's like an ongoing thing, like years ago, like a meme. I would say a meme or a trend where people would say like the birds aren't real. So like apparently like the government uses like robotic birds or something like that. But like I haven't heard about any other fake animals, so I'm curious to see what
1970s,
animals
the
he's talking
CIA
about.
developed what they called the Insectothopter, which was a drone the size of a
Insect?
dragonfly and hand-painted to look like one. It
Oh,
was
wow.
kept secret until December 2003, when it was revealed to the public at the CIA Museum, and the project was abandoned because it was too difficult to fly in crosswinds. Another similar project was the AeroVironment Nano Hummingbird,
there's a bird.
created with specifications given by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. These weren't the only times they used animals or crafted fake animals to spy on their enemies. During the Cold War, they developed a camera so light that it could be carried by pigeons in order to take aerial photos.
Not spy
and they even
pigeons,
trained
bro.
some of these pigeons to drop eavesdropping devices onto window ledges. However, despite successfully placing some of these
we got spy pigeons before GTA 6.
devices, no usable audio was captured from them. They even used fake fish to secretly check water samples for the presence of nuclear runoff
Fake
or other suspicious substances.
fish.
USA's fake Vietnam attack. In 1964, tensions between the United States and North Vietnam were at an all-time high, and things worsened on the 2nd of August when North Vietnamese forces shot at a U.S. destroyer while it was doing a covert operation close to North Vietnamese territorial waters. The U.S. government then, on the 4th of August, said that a second attack happened, while this was false. The commander of the Maddox, Captain John Herrick, initially reported the attack but later expressed doubts, attributing the radar signals to freak weather effects. And despite these uncertainties, the Lyndon Johnson administration relied
I gotta be honest, we're off to a weak start in terms of my knowledge base of conspiracy theories. We got a lot of new ones that I haven't heard before.
On misinterpreted
Besides the
communications
animals, the
intercepts
fake
to
animals.
conclude that the attack was real. Also, in October
I knew about
2005,
the birds,
the
not
New
the
York
fish.
Times reported that Robert J. Hanyuk, an historian for the
dragonfly.
NSA, concluded that the NSA distorted intelligence reports passed to policymakers. He said agency staff deliberately skewed the evidence to make it appear that an attack had occurred. This was probably done with the goal of providing the Johnson administration with the justification needed for military action in Vietnam. Years after the incident, Robert McNamara...
It's just a reoccurring thing that you hear about. There's a reason why people with pattern recognition skills are able to pick up on things, and they say things that may seem kind of crazy. But I think, as we're seeing now in the year of our Lord in 2025, that reality is often stranger than fiction, and I think we're getting a taste of that. We got a taste of that in 2024. I mean, honestly, 2020 up until present day, but I'd be interested to see what gets released this year, like classified stuff that gets released. I think they already released some stuff about like MLK and some JFK files, and some other stuff. I haven't really been keeping tabs, to be completely honest, but the more you deep dive, the more you kind of understand that this stuff has been happening for a while. But
the Secretary of Defense during the time admitted himself that the August 4th attack had never occurred. The Johnson administration was probably just seeking a reason to escalate American involvement in Vietnam as Cold War tensions increased, and the domino theory made its way through the U.S. military, which said that the fall of one country to communism would lead to the fall of others in the region, causing more fear. Because of this false operation, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting President Johnson broad powers to conduct military operations in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. Canada's Gay Radar. At that time, homosexual people were persecuted by the Canadian government, and they were trying to find new ways to get rid of them from public jobs, especially the police and military.
What?
In the 1960s, Dr. Frank Robert Wake...
Wait. How? What? I know gaydar is a thing where like people can say they can sense the gayness on somebody themselves, but there's actual technology to sense gay people? That's kind of crazy.
Psychology professor at Carleton University developed what's called the gaydar or
fruit machine.
A series of psychological tests with the purpose of identifying gay men. It worked by using erotic images and what were thought to be homosexual words to see if there were any physiological changes that could point to a sexual arousal, such as the dilation of their pupils. Of course, this machine was completely pseudoscientific and unreliable.
Oh, okay.
The room's light could change the dilation of the pupil, and many more outside variables made it false.
So it is not accurate. Got it.
Nonetheless, these tests caused hundreds, if not thousands, of people to get fired. The U.S. government poisoned alcohol. From 1920 to 1933,
not surprised.
The United States...
I mean, if you think about it now, the food supply that we have, the water that we have, at least in America, like the fluoridated water, I think that's banned in Europe. Fluoride is banned in water in Europe or some European countries. It's definitely banned in some countries. I know that for sure. Like we have fluoride in our water. We got like random pesticides and chemicals and preservatives and other things in our food. You know, they're trying to put bugs in our food now. Like, I'm not surprised. Poisoning the alcohol, I'm not surprised. And I guess this was... Okay, it's from 1920 to 1933. So this was during Prohibition. Now, this is a thought that I've had before. Like, since they've legalized weed, how much of that has been tainted with, if you will,
banned alcohol, entering the Prohibition era. This made the alcohol black market flourish, enabling criminal organizations like the Mafia to enrich themselves. So the United States government had to find a way to stop this. They went to extreme lengths to try to reduce the black market's activity and to make people stop drinking. But their efforts had poor results. So the government became frustrated and started adding large amounts of methyl alcohol, a substance that made the illegal drinks really dangerous, as a very small amount of undiluted methyl alcohol could kill a human being. This was probably probably done thinking that the black market sellers would have avoided selling poisoned alcohol to
They
their
don't care.
customers,
They just
as
wanna
they
make
would have
money.
lost them when they died. But they didn't take into account that the demand for illegal alcohol was
going
so booming
crazy.
at the time that the sellers didn't really care about their customers' lives.
Right.
The effects quickly showed. In 1926, in New York City,
Just like a drug
500
dealer, like they don't care if their customer dies. There are going to be plenty of people that are going to get addicted, and they're just going to come back until they drop dead, and then the next cycle of people, the next round of people come in and buy stuff. It's just it is what it is.
people died from this government action, and over 5,000 fatalities from this poisoning. At least a 600% increase from the previous deaths from alcohol
That's
were
so
said
sad.
to have resulted in the entire country. CIA's fake vaccines. During the hunt for Osama
I'm not going to say anything.
bin Laden, the CIA conducted a secret operation using a fake hepatitis vaccination program in Pakistan to illegally collect blood samples and confirm the presence of bin Laden or his family. The CIA planned to compare
Yeah, but wasn't Bin Laden also a CIA agent as well? That is something I did know. Believe it or not,
DNA samples
that
collected from the
is facts.
program with the DNA of bin Laden.
Supposedly, who knows? Who knows? Our whole reality itself could just be fake. We could just be living in a simulation.
Laden's sister, who had died in Boston in 2010. The program ultimately failed. It led to the arrest of a participating doctor, Shakil Afridi, and was widely criticized for undermining public health. The operation is blamed for increasing vaccine hesitancy in Pakistan and triggering violence against healthcare workers, who were perceived as spies. As a result, Pakistan saw a resurgence of polio, becoming the country with the highest number of polio cases in the world by 2014. The CIA director issued a directive in 2013 prohibiting the agency from using vaccination programs for operational purposes, including recruiting healthcare workers. It's in situations like these that we see the impact information has on our perception and beliefs. The health of the Pakistani population was undermined by disinformation that caused disbelief in the healthcare system. It's crucial to get an objective view on matters.
And in 2020, America had to fall in line with that BS as well.
News outlets might frame stories through a different lens based on their political leanings and interests. Fortunately, today's sponsor, Ground News, addresses this issue by enabling us to see a broader, unbiased perspective by gathering information from a multitude of sources. For example, it has been reported that Mexico warned they would impose their own tariffs and retaliate 40 outlets who tip clear. For example, a right-leaning source in your own is under think Ground News informed with context you can't find anywhere else. Or scan my QR code for 50% off the same top-tier Vantage plan I use for unlimited access to all their features. Thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Operation Sea Spray. In 1950, the Navy wanted to test the vulnerability of a city like San Francisco to a biological weapons attack in a project called Operation Sea Spray.
Sure,
To do
why
so,
not?
They released two types of bacteria, Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigii, into San Francisco Bay. The operation happened between September 20th and 27th, and the bacteria were released from a ship off the coast of San Francisco. It's said that they did this because they thought they would have been harmless to humans, but on October 11th, 11 residents checked into Stanford Hospital in San Francisco with very rare, serious urinary
Hey guys, we're gonna just test and see how strong our city is by putting some random bacteria in the water in the hopes that nobody will get infected, and they just don't care. They just don't care about us, bro. I'm telling you. It's
tract infections. 10 of them recovered, but one
Weird.
man who had had recent prostate surgery died 3 weeks later from a heart valve infection. His relatives later tried to sue the government, but they lost because the bacteria used in the test was unproven to be responsible for his death.
That's
the
so
urinary tract
unfortunate.
outbreak was so unusual that the Stanford doctors wrote it up for a medical journal. None of the other hospitals in the city reported similar spikes in cases, and all 11 victims had urinary tract infections following medical procedures, suggesting that the source of their infections was inside the hospital.
I mean, besides the guy, we got cases of pneumonia. Besides the guy that died from the heart complications, and then the people that got urinary tract infections, I guess it could be worse. I mean,
Cases
they got
of pneumonia in
as well.
San Francisco also increased after
That's
Serratia marcescens was
also
released,
pretty bad.
even though a causal relationship has not been established. Overall, the Army determined that San Francisco had received enough of a dose for nearly all of the city's 800,000 residents to inhale at least 5,000 of the particles, which is within the range of infectivity for anthrax. Project Sunshine. Project Sunshine was a series of research studies done by the U.S. government that began in 1953 to see the impact of radioactive fallout on the world's population, which remained secret until 3 years later, in 1956. They wanted to see the body's reaction to
First, let's use bacteria, and now let's use radiation, because that's also really good for the human body as well.
Radioactive isotope strontium-90,
Like
which
what?
represented the most serious threat to human health from nuclear fallout, especially on kids, since their young developing bone tissues have the highest propensity to accumulate strontium-90, and thus they have the highest susceptibility to radiation damage. Of course, this type of experiment wasn't that feasible, since doing it on alive humans would be an ethical monstrosity, and there weren't many familiars that would like to donate their deceased loved ones to be experimented on like this. Somehow, though,
I would
1,500 sample
understand.
cadavers, mostly babies and young children, appeared out of nowhere. That's because they were taken from countries ranging from Australia to Europe, often without their parents' consent or knowledge. A British mother had even said that her
So they're trafficking dead children to experiment on them with radiation. Did I understand that correctly?
stillborn baby's legs were removed by British doctors, and to prevent her from finding out what had happened, she was not allowed to dress
me?
the baby for the funeral. The Dalai Lama worked for the CIA. During the Cold War,
I did
it
hear
seemed
about
like
this.
China and its Communist Party wanted to increase their influence on Tibet, which worried the United States. Consequently, the CIA created what was called the CIA Tibetan Program, where they trained and strengthened various isolated Tibetan resistance groups, which eventually led to the creation of a paramilitary force of 2,000 men. They also sent military
ISIS?
supplies in stealthy ways to not attract China's attention, and they spread pro-Tibetan propaganda by showing the human rights abuses in Tibet under Chinese rule. The plan
I
reached
think, at least.
$1.7 million of annual funding, and the funny thing is that the Dalai Lama himself received an annual salary of $180,000 from the late 1950s to the mid-1970s, even though he stated that he used most of the funds received from the CIA to finance the activities of the Tibetan government in exile.
That's
His
probably
brother,
cap.
Gyalo Thondup, was also considered a CIA's top asset. The program ended after President Nixon visited China to establish closer relations in 1972, but the Dalai Lama and his brother thought that this demonstrated that the US didn't care about genuinely helping the Tibetan people, but that they were following their own interests in the Cold War. The US president's wife became the real president. Edith Wilson was the wife of President Woodrow Wilson when, in October 1919, he suffered a stroke that heavily incapacitated him. They hid the true extent of the president's illness and disability from the American public.
Makes
and
sense.
although she was never officially elected president of the United
Shadow
States,
presidency.
she played a significant role in managing the country after her husband's condition.
That's
and some
completely
scholars
plausible.
even call her the secret president or the first woman president. She took control of many of the day-to-day functions of the executive branch, deciding which communications, issues, and matters of state were important enough to bring to the bedridden president's attention. For this reason, she required that all members of the cabinet send urgent matters, memoranda, correspondence, questions, and requests to her. In this way, she became the sole link of communication between the president and his cabinet. Even though she claimed that she didn't take any decisions herself, her role as a potential gatekeeper of info gave her lots of power and influence, and some suggest that she even successfully pushed for the removal of Secretary of State Robert Lansing. CIA's cat spies. In the 1960s,
Not the
Operation Acoustic
cats.
Kitty was launched, which aimed to use cats as spies. This project's estimated
Didn't
cost,
hear about that.
according to former CIA officer Victor Marchetti, was around $20 million, and the procedure consisted
Oh
of
my
implanting a
gosh.
microphone.
Just I'm hearing all the numbers here. Just imagine all the tax dollars that went to this, bro. All the money that went to spying on other countries, spying on US citizens, spying or poisoning citizens on multiple occasions. And that's just back then. Imagine what the tax dollars are being used for today. I mean, talk about Ukraine and other wars like Iraq and other stuff. Like, just taxes were also supposed to go away, just FYI. But like after World War II, I think. But This should be interesting.
in the cat's ear canal, a small radio transmitter at the base of its skull, and a thin wire. in
Those
its
poor
heart.
cats,
The first
man.
mission of a cat spy was to eavesdrop on two men in a park near the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. The cat was released nearby, but was almost immediately hit by a taxi. However, Robert Wallace, a former director of the CIA's Office of Technical Service, disputed this version in 2013. He said the project was abandoned due to the difficulty in training the cat. This failure, accompanied by other failed tests, caused the project to get shut down in 1967. USA's gay bomb.
What?
The idea of a gay bomb, a non-lethal chemical weapon designed to make enemy soldiers attracted to each other, was considered by the U.S. Air Force. This hypothetical weapon, mentioned in a 1994 Department of Defense document, aimed to disperse sexual pheromones among enemy forces to generate mutual attraction, leading to mass confusion and panic. Along with the gay bomb, other ideas were discussed.
Definitely
such as
never heard of
remotely
this.
engineering body odors using compounds found in bad breath and excessive sweating, with the goal of making the enemy so smelly that they could be easily detected by their opponents. However, there is no
What?
evidence that these weapons were used or that it's possible to create such a thing. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord. Link in the description.
Wow. Okay. That was not what I was expecting at all, but I can't say that I'm surprised either. Huh. The more you know.